Hi, how's it going? I'm going to talk to you about an amazing book by Stephen King. It's called The Green Mile. If you don't know who Stephen King is, I don't know where you've been. He's written so many books. He's written The Shining, he's written It, Pet Sematary, Carrie, Dark Tower, Firestarter, Shawshank Redemption. So many books I can't even name them all. This book in particular, The Green Mile, was written in 1996 by Stephen King, and it is a dark fantasy novel. It was originally written in volumes, one volume every month in the New York Times for 6 months, 6 volumes, and it was a number one bestseller every volume, every time. So they put it together into a book. And this is the pocket-sized edition, and it has the movie picture on it because this book was also made again after the movie came out. The main character is Paul Edgecombe. He is a guard at the E-Block, and many, many years later he writes a memoir that tells of his time in 1932 at the penitentiary when a convict called John Coffey comes in. Now, John Coffey is a 7 foot tall, large black man. And when he comes in, this is the 30s when there's racial discrimination and segregation and all that other climate just going on. And of course, Edgecombe and his white guards are like, they're thrown back by the guy. But they start realizing some weird things about him. Like, for one, he's a giant, but he has a kind heart. And then he has powers, and I can't tell you those powers are because I don't want to ruin the book. But anyways, so Paul starts questioning life, and because of Coffee. One of the guards in particular, his name is Percy Wetmore, and he is a horrible, horrible person to the guards and the criminals. If you ever want to see what happens to a person like that, well, it's in here. Now, we have lots of other things going on, but the biggest thing is Coffee. He's in there, convicted of killing 2 girls. Did he do it? Did he not do it? Well, like I said, he's black. It's 30s, so it doesn't really matter if he did it or not. Can they really do anything about it? But as we journey through this, Coffee gives Edgecombe some different perspectives on life, and because of that, it makes it a powerful, emotional book. Now, there are definitely some scenes in the book, some parts that would be definitely not for teens, unless you're like a teen of higher age, or if you're a young adult. Definitely some parts I can't mention that are gruesome and violent. There are definitely parts that are definitely not for kids. This was also made into a major motion picture. It stars Tom Hanks as Edgecombe. Tom Hanks, Castaway, Big, other movies of that nature. And it co-stars as Coffee, Michael Clarke Duncan, who wasn't really big at that time, but because of this movie, his success blew up because he did the character of Coffee so wonderful. Stephen King has even come out and said that Tom Hanks and Michael Clarke Duncan killed it in their roles, and they are the epitome of what he was expecting them to be. The movie doesn't really have a whole lot of differences. In fact, it's one of the better adaptations of book to movie because they're pretty much the same thing. The only real difference is the book took place in 1932, the movie took place in 1935, only because they wanted Coffee to be able to see a certain movie that wasn't out yet until 1935. Also, the book, there's a couple little differences that would ruin it for you, so I don't want to say, but they're really not that big. Where you go and see the movie, you expect a lot of differences, but they're not. The movie was directed by Frank Darabont, and he directed Shawshank Redemption, which was another Stephen King adaptation, which is one of the best movies of all time. Now, The Green Mile is an amazing book and an amazing movie, and I believe that if you are a King fan or a fan of fantasy or even of something that could almost be considered historical fiction, then this is the type of book for you. The Green Mile, read it.
But for the ones who actually had to sit down in that chair, the humor went out of the situation in a hurry. I presided over 78 executions during my time at Cold Mountain. That's one figure I've never been confused about. I'll remember it on my deathbed. And I think that for most of those men, the truth of what was happening to them finally hit all the way home when their ankles were being clamped to the stout oak of old Sparky's legs. The realization came then. You would see it rising in their eyes, a kind of old dismay that their own legs had finished their careers. The blood still ran in them, the muscles were still strong, but they were finished. All the same, they were never going to walk another country mile or dance with a girl at a barn raising. Old Sparky's clients came to the knowledge of their deaths from the ankles up. There was a black silk bag that went over their heads after they had finished their rambling and mostly disjointed last remarks. It was supposed to be for them, but I always thought it was really for us, to keep us from seeing the awful tide of dismay in their eyes as they realized they were going to die with their knees bent.
The movie was directed by Frank. Keane has even come out and said that Tom Hanks and Clark, yeah, Michael Clark Duncan, Now, this book was made into a motion picture 3 years later in 1999. Tom Hanks. You guys should know Tom Hanks. He's been in tons of movies. But one of the ones that comes to mind to me is... Hey, how's it going there today? I'm going to talk to you about The Green Mile. It's by Stephen King. If you don't know who Stephen King is, where have you been? Stephen King is a world-renowned author. He has written so many books. So many. I mean, you don't even know who he is. He's written Salem's Lot. He's written Pet Sematary, Carrie, Shawshank Redemption, It, Firestarter, Dark Tower, all sorts of movies. He has written so many books, and I can't believe it. That's the stupidest thing ever said. Did you hear what I said?
You said he's written so many books.
I can't believe it.
Okay, baby.
No, I'm just thinking about it. I can't even believe it. A little bit about the book. It takes place in Louisiana, Cold Mountain Penitentiary, and it has something. And he tells about how in 1932, one particular convict comes to the prison and changes everything he knows about, poop. It has John Coffey. It's not the main character. And if you ever want to see what can happen to that kind of person, then you want to read this book to see what happens to Percy, because it is fun. That's not right. If you ever want to see what happens to a person like that, then this is your type of book. No, it's not. That doesn't make any sense. And, not... I don't know.
I didn't name other movies.